So today I'm going to again create another segment on the Stephen Avery case, and I will be talking a little bit about something which goes to the heart of the matter. And I want to thank the person with whom I had an argument regarding the Stephen Avery case, because it just made me dig a little deeper and find out certain new aspects of the case, and I would like to present that to you. It might be technical, so what I'll be first doing is I'll be just setting up the premise so that you all understand exactly how like this thing can be fleshed out. Okay, so I will be concentrating on various aspects. Many people who are telling me that we already know about these facts. You're absolutely right. But there are many people who don't know about the facts, and they are probably watching the documentary for the first time. They are trying to fill in the gaps, and there is a certain amount of circumstantial evidence against Stephen Avery. Again, I will make a video on the circumstantial evidence against Stephen Avery and how it does not even fit regarding the balance of probabilities or the preponderance of probabilities when it comes to circumstantial evidence which is required in order to convict a person. Because in my book, I don't think this case, the guilt of Stephen Avery has been proved beyond reasonable doubt. That is a mistake which was made by the jury, but many people were asking me, but when it comes to circumstantial evidence, I believe it fits. Yes, there are a few points which fit, but there are also a few points which don't fit. So we will have to, again, what I'm trying to say, it's very dangerous to go ahead and judge a homicide based on certain parts of facts. You cannot do it. You will have to go ahead and string them all together so that it makes up a cogent whole based on which you can go ahead and convict a person. It's never that a person is presumed guilty and then you have to prove his innocence. The balance of criminal law is that he's presumed innocent until proven guilty. So I know the balance is very unfair if you look at it. If you look at a murderer or a killer, actually more than often they get away. But at the same time, here the opposite happened, because here what happened was Stephen Avery was presumed guilty until proven innocent. And Brenton Daisy, I'm just amazed. I can't even believe he was presumed anything, because there is no way he should have been kept in prison for so long. Again, I do not want to digress, so let me just go ahead and get to the heart of the matter. So, firstly, we will be looking at certain aspects of this criminal, how we need to proceed. Now, one of the most fundamental aspects when it comes to a homicide is, of course, a body, the identification of the body, and then based on the identification of the body, then the reconstruction of the crime. But I'm sorry to say, I went through all the transcripts. I did not find one reliable piece of evidence which could state with certainty that Teresa Halbach's Teresa Halbach was identified with the bones which were found in the gravel pit near Stephen Avery's home. I could not find that out. I'm sorry to say, I just couldn't find that out. Yes, there are three things which have been stated. I will put them up, but um, I really could not find a kind of a very reliable piece of evidence which clearly states that these were Teresa Halbach's remains. There are sorry, there are none. The one which we are talking about, it also does not conclusively prove that it is Teresa Halbach's remains, the bones which were found in the gravel pit. Okay, one more aspect to it which I would like to point out. The thing about this is, it's very interesting, and that is the Manitowoc coroner was not involved in the preservation of these bones, in the isolation of the crime scene. She was nowhere involved. She was just ousted. when she wanted to go to the scene of crime. As you can see, as you if you watch Making of Murderer season 2, you will find out how she was shut out. And the coroner's office is higher than a sheriff's office, and the sheriff said, no, you don't have to go. And the reason which was given is there was a conflict of interest. Oh, please, let's not even talk about conflict of interest, because you had Manitowoc deputies and sheriff and everybody helping the Calumet county officers in the crime scene. So come on, man, what are you guys kidding me? Huh? And that is what was proposed by the lead prosecutor there, that you cannot take the testimony of the coroner who hailed from Manitowoc, and Manitowoc was not part of that coroner was not part of the investigation which actually put Stephen Avery in jail in the first place, for which he did 18 years. That's where conflict of interest happens. And the defense counsels asked the judge that why are we not allowing her? But they did not, because they stated it's conflict of interest. So what happened essentially was, the Calumet County coroner was brought in, and he was in charge of the whole investigation with respect to preservation of bones, isolation of the quarry, and the burn pit, everything. So he was the person, and he identified the remains. And I'll tell you how he identified the remains also as Teresa Halbach's, because I think that is something which is very important to the case. But I'm just going to jump a little, and I'm going to go ahead and go to a point where, as you know, Catherine, I'll be reading it out, because there are a lot of points to this case which need to be read out exactly the way it is. Okay. Now, so what happened was, based on the bone fragments found in the county gravel pit, Zellner preferred a new theory based on new evidence to support Avery's upcoming case. This began in 2018, when she filed a motion to have the suspected human bones that were being held by the Wisconsin Department of Justice to be tested for DNA. The bones came from 3 different burn piles. Please note this. There were 3 different burn piles which were very contiguous to the Stephen Avery home. Now look at the odds of finding 3 suspected human bones from 3 different locations which are very contiguous to Stephen Avery's home. Within the Manitowoc County owned quarry, and one is within the Manitowoc County owned quarry. Okay, that was one. And among them was a pelvic bone fragment. A pelvic bone, you cannot get it from an animal. Okay, it was a human being's pelvic bone fragment. Now, new technology used to identify victims in the California wildfires would allow Zellner, if she had won the appeal, to test the bones for Teresa Halbach's DNA. However, when the motion was filed, Zellner soon discovered that the state had returned the bones to the Halbach's family. Now, the moment they returned the bones to Halbach's family, right, and essentially, the family can probably burn it or cremate it. I'm not blaming the family, but the moment they do it, you're not preserving the bones. How can you not do that? You need to preserve evidence, right? And for this case, Zellner went on to file another motion saying that the return of bones to the Halbach family constituted an Arizona versus Youngblood violation, which meant that the potentially crucial exculpatory evidence could not be tested. It's very important. This point is actually very important, and I'll even talk about the exculpatory evidence which they're talking about and how it impacts the case and what the state is proposing. So I'll even go ahead and highlight parts of the argument which have been filed by the state against Zellner, and I'll tell you how baseless it is. Okay, listen, I'll tell you what the basic point here is, okay, so that you all understand exactly why we are already talking about the exculpatory of evidence and all these things. Because the basic point of evidence is that there are certain bones which have been identified by Halbach's, All the other evidence we really don't need. All the other bones we don't need. We don't care about it. So we can just get rid of it in any way possible. No, you can't do that. You, if there is medical advancement and we can actually go ahead and carry tests on those bones, and there is some sort of medical science which can verify that yes, that we can verify for certain that the DNA belonged to Teresa Halbach, what's your problem? We can actually conclusively prove Stephen Avery's guilt because all the bones belong to Teresa Halbach. By getting rid of all these bones, what they did was they actually went ahead and very sneakily like prevented any further testing of the bones. Okay, so I was really surprised that yes, as Zellner has said, it's a very sneaky way to get evidence destroyed. It seems very deliberated that the thinking was we need to get rid of these bones, but we just can't go in and cremate these bones. So the best way to do it is actually return it to the family and they can do whatever they feel like, right? And I will actually show you the actual motion which has been filed by the state, wherein they state that these remains have been returned to the family and these are unidentified and they cannot conclusively identify that these are Teresa Halbach's remains. So if they are not Teresa Halbach's remains, okay, if you cannot conclusively identify that these are Teresa Halbach's remains, then why are you returning it to the family? My point is that to the county, to the Wisconsin county, why are you returning it to them? For what kind of closure? Because you don't know for certain that those bones belong to Teresa Halbach. So why are you returning it? You better keep them. And what is the Arizona versus Youngblood violation, which again I would like to point out. So Arizona versus Youngblood violation is essentially the principle, the holding is, unless a criminal defendant can show bad faith on the part of police, failure to preserve potentially useful evidence does not constitute a denial of the due process of law. So that's got two parts. One is, unless a criminal defendant can show bad faith on the part of the police, failure to preserve potentially useful evidence does not constitute a denial of due process of law. Now, I do not want to go into the exact statement because I personally think that this very principle in itself is a little contradictory. Does the state not have enough space to actually preserve evidence? Don't you have that? So why do you want to go ahead and destroy that evidence? We citizens pay you taxes, you preserve it. You've got a lot of money, preserve it. For that, you don't need a kind of a conditional statement stating unless you prove bad faith of the police. How do you prove bad faith of the police? How do you prove bad faith of the police? You can't prove it. You can see it in this case. Every place it reeks of. It just makes me nauseous thinking about exactly what has happened. But still, we cannot prove bad faith of the police in Stephen Avery's case, where extremes have been committed. Extremes have been committed in the name of law. And you mean to say this does not happen all over US? It does. It's difficult. It's very difficult to prove bad faith of police. So I would say this law in itself, I don't subscribe to it. And if you look at the facts of the case, you will notice that actually it states to the latter that yes, there was something which happened based on which medical advancement came in and could actually free an innocent person who was being held guilty. Essentially what happened was there was a rape committed on a minor, and what happened was the testing on the clothing, because it had deteriorated as a result of it not being refrigerated. So what happened was the boy picked the defendant out of a photo lineup as an assailant, but that person, that assailant's blood was preserved in this degraded piece of clothing. Okay, so the person who was convicted, he said that please get this tested because I'm innocent, right? And the court denied him that you can't do it because police have not acted in bad faith. How doesn't I don't see the connection, but anyways, forget it. Then the court reversed the decision, and this clothing was later on again tested with advanced DNA testing mechanisms, and it was found that this person who was being held unjustly, he was innocent, and there was another person who was guilty. He was still serving time, and thankfully the court could get him, and so he got a double penalty and he served more time. So what does this show? It shows that yes, preserve evidence, put them in lockers, put them in there. If you need to build a goddamn building, build it and preserve that evidence. Just don't, eventually what does the family want? The family wants the real color to be picked up. Family does not want a kind of a closure where you hold a innocent person and put him in jail and you say, yes, he's the one, he's the one, he's the one. Some of them will be satisfied. But if after 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 years they realize, or maybe 25 years, 35 years, then they suddenly realize, no, this is the guy who killed the person who was in jail. He was innocent. And this guy is probably suffering from terminal cancer and he's on his deathbed and he made a confession and then you somehow get it. Would that family get closure? Would they get closure knowing that? Because you have already wasted one person's life and the other person is possibly just going to die the next second and he just makes a confession and there's that. That's the reason why I just wanted to put up an analogous story in order to make you all understand that evidence, you cannot destroy it in any way. You cannot go ahead and get rid of it, especially in such a high profile case. And then you go up putting strange kind of rebuttals stating that no, you can't do it, you exhausted, you had already a lot of time to get these bones tested and everything. It's tough when you're a common man on the streets. It's tough when you're from a middle class background where you just don't have the money or the resources to employ a person to actually get things done and employ an efficient person like Zellner. It's difficult to find a person like that, and it's even more difficult to convince them. Thankfully, we had a documentary like Making a Murderer, which could present the facts in a certain way so that she could understand where all the problems had occurred. Right? Even when I was watching season 1, I was just thinking, why aren't the defense counsels going ahead and testing this, testing that? I didn't know why they were not doing it, man. This is common sense. You have to go ahead and get these other bones tested because these are possibly mixed with the other bones. Now, if you could have proven that there were more than one victim or the bones belong to a different person, then it's a crazy theory. You don't know what has happened. Because if Teresa Halbach's remains are mixed with another person's bones, then you don't. It is a crazy kind of a revelation which needed more investigation. This is not something wherein you are writing a paperback novel. It is something wherein you need to concentrate on the facts and you need to eliminate everything in order to find out exactly what happened here. Okay, so that's what I wanted to tell you all, that the bones, which are the most important aspect of identifying whether it is Teresa Halbach who is dead, whether there are other remains with Teresa Halbach's, they have all gone. Okay, but there is a clincher which is very important and I would like to go ahead and point it out because I was just looking at the rebuttal to Zellner from the state, and then I found out an interesting point which I feel we should actually, this part should be actually explored a little more. But before that, I would just like to also So I'm sorry, I'm just going ahead and reading the facts. I don't want you to go ahead and I'll just siphon out the exact facts which I felt were interesting and which should be. Um, okay. So this is the actual transcript, and I would just like to read a passage out of it so that you all are understanding like where this comes from, right? Furthermore, the state did not act in bad faith when it released the bone fragments to the Halbach family. Disposition of some of the bone fragments occurred on September 20, 2011. The Court of Appeals has issued a decision denying Averi's request for new trial on August 24, 2011. In analyzing the circumstances surrounding the disposition of some of the fragments for burial, it is important to note that the bone fragments, human or not, were not part of Averi's direct appeal. There was no pre-trial request made by trial counsel. There was no request by appellate counsel during direct appeal to examine any of the bone fragments. What do you expect? The fragments had nothing to do with the issues raised in Averi's direct appeal. As addressed below, the bone fragments reserved state preserved some bone fragments clearly identified as the remains of Teresa Halbach, or that could be identified as being female human bone, and the state made reasonable efforts to determine the identity. Hence, importance of the bone fragments in 8675, where it sent the items to FBI. The FBI could not test the items when these items were inexplicably released to the family. Look at this. When these items were inexplicably released to the family, their origin remained scientifically undetermined. Under these circumstances, there is no bad fate. Okay? So, in going ahead and stating this point, what they're basically saying is that when these items were released to the family, their origin remained scientifically undetermined. Under these circumstances, there is no bad faith. So, in order to go ahead and say that there is no bad faith, they have inadvertently gone ahead and shown how, like, I don't know how could you release these bone fragments to the family when you don't even know that those are Teresa Halbach's bones. What exactly is the objective of this exercise? To go ahead and give a burial of a person with bones which don't belong to her, which you don't have any idea about, which I had just mentioned a little while back. So if there is no, why do you give the bones? You give the bones. Still, I would have said if they had actually released the bones which conclusively identified her as Teresa Halbach, even though that is a very wrong thing to do. Uh, like, still, that is an objective because you're basically paying respects to the victim and you're releasing one part of the bones or something. That is something which you can say, okay, fine. That is not a correct, that is the right thing to do, right? But what they did was they released bones which were sent to FBI. They could not identify it, so they're sending it to the family. Please, now you bury your, now you bury Teresa Halbach. Bones, we don't know whom it belongs to. Human, animal, we have no idea. I'm sorry I'm saying this, but this is exactly what the state has said. Have some shame. Why? How could you actually? This is something so wrong and derogatory to the family that you release these bones. And you are fighting against everything just to, I don't know, are you trying to shield the killer or what is it? We all want to know the truth. We don't want anything. We want to know exactly what happened. And I think what exactly happened will bring closure to the family. We are all, again, we are all dictated by our passion to know exactly what happened on that night to Teresa Halbach. It has nothing to do with the other aspects. Those are incidental. I'll be very frank with you. I'll be very frank with you. Yes, I want Stephen Avery to get a retrial. I want Brendan Dassey to get free, but those are incidental things. What really happened to this bright, young, beautiful person that night? We need to know it. Who exactly did it? Get dictated by that part, the pursuit of truth, instead of all these ridiculous things which you're doing. I'm so like, it's just so pathetic. And last time I felt so frustrated and down was when I was looking into the case of Arushi Talwar, but I didn't know where to express my feelings or anything. That every day I used to see how they were being crucified by the media and everybody and the parents, and it was so heartbreaking. And I'm seeing the exact thing happening here, and I just don't know what to do. The best thing I can do is probably go ahead and keep on making these posts so that you all can understand. Now, the basic thing here again is that there were, as I told you, there were bones found in various areas, and those were very contiguous to various property. Now, what are the odds of finding these kinds of bones contiguous to your property? Right? It's very low. And you have to also remember the canines or the cadavers, they went into other parts of the property first, and then it was later on they tried to go ahead and zone in on another property. But that was later on. But when first they tried to investigate exactly what was happening, the cadavers went into the adjoining areas, which just makes us feel that there is some sort of foul play which needs to be investigated with more care. We still have little evidence with us, and we need to understand exactly what happened. I will be again going ahead and presenting another report, which is the supplemental affidavit of John D. Dehan, the expert who was hired by Tatlin Zellner. So that you all understand, he actually deduced these things from the photos, and I will go ahead and present them. I don't want you all to go ahead and blindly follow me. I don't want that. Question me. I had an argument with a person today, and which I kind of delved deeper into this part, the bones, Teresa Halbach, which I will be making other segments, because there are various technical failures, technical lacunae, and there are various forensic misses. So there is a lot of things, and if you put all of them together, you can actually show bad faith of the police, because all these things couldn't have happened until and unless there was some sort of engineering which happened in the background. And I would like to propose the same thing. If you want to show circumstantial evidence to go ahead and prove Stephen Avery guilty, you should also apply the same principle of circumstantial evidence on the police when you see a mountain of inaccuracies in front of you. So even that same principle or the test should be applied on the police to prove bad faith. You may not be able to conclusively prove that they did this. We cannot have a recording of that. Okay, Fassbender did this, or he did this, he did that. Kranz talked to him. No, we can't. We cannot. We are human. We are not. We are not Superman, or we are not Batman that we can do that. No, we can't. But when you see that there are, whatever happens, it has an effect. When you check that effect, and that effect shows on the very object, it shows that there has been some sort of devious engineering which has happened at the background. That's how you can actually go ahead and infer bad faith. Okay, now what I'll be doing next time is I will be going into the remains of Teresa Halbach, how it was identified, what were the principles, what was the how was it used to actually go ahead and identify her remains.
Yes.
And accordingly, we will discuss that. Signing off. Bye.